Yeah, I am now and always will be a newcomer to town. I've only lived here 35 years. It's our honor tonight to have a number of people who have lived here for longer than that. And they're going to relate stories from their childhood and from their family's child and family stories about what it's like living in Ashley Falls. We live in such a special place, and it's been that way. And when I first came here, I was the newcomer on the block, and everyone was old and has been here forever, and they've all sort of left us now. It turns out I walked in my house, the post office, there are only 2 people who lived here any longer than I have. A brief public service announcement. We live in a very unique situation where we have a direct democracy, where the town meeting is where we are the legislature and decide things for our town. There is upcoming a critical decision about where our schools come, whether it's school or Great Barrington or staying in Sheffield. And I invite you to investigate and learn about that so that at the special town meeting you can make an informed decision. There are pluses and negatives, but something we prepared. I just want to make sure you know that's not a surprise. Now, this is how we're going to go. We're going to first have some storytellers. Now we are on the Zoom.
Neil, can you clarify that that school vote is not until fall? It is not.
Yes, it's not May. Thank you very much. It's special town meeting.
Yeah, it's like it.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So this is being zoomed and recorded. So we're all going to try to hold. We're not professional speakers here. We're all going to try to hold the microphone so you can hear us. But after our speakers are done, we're going to have time for both questions for the speakers or for stories from all of you. I look around the room and I see a number of people who will have some stories. So I'm excited about this evening. Just let's get started here. We're going to start with Priscilla Ruger, who is going to give us a rundown on pictures from her uncle Fred Hall, who was the historian and photographer through the area. And she's going to narrate the photos. And take it away. Yeah.
Okay, we're starting with Fred Hall section. So we'll start with this part of his family who owned the Ashley Falls Monumental Works. My grandfather, George Hall, and my dad, William Hall. Fred was my dad's youngest brother, born in, I think, 1907. And he lived to 120. Just for a little bit of info, people like mine don't. And that's still all in his house. That we couldn't walk between them. And the railroad wanted money, so they wanted him to buy, and it was exorbitant price. So they moved over to East Main Street. So that's enough on walls. Let's move on. It'll be small, but different. And that's 2 quarry houses. When the quarry put up there, people that worked for them. This one in the front was where the vaults lived. The one in the back had a number of people I can't even begin to remember. The most important one was the one I married. But Fred lived there for a while and he went to Pittsfield and worked at the GE. Then went to Canaan and ran a hardware store. People make money. And these 2 houses are still there, not quite looking the same. And the porch is still on our old, it's gone. So next one. And it's kind of a funny one. We decided would be fun. This is all the Hall men. My grandfather George, my uncle George, Fred, my dad built, and these three guys standing on side of the in-laws. Alan Fuller and Ken Roberts and John Weston. Alan Fuller on their story. Ken had a meat market and came. And we'll go next. I don't want to take them. This was just a trip. And this place, I found out a lot of people don't know what it is or where it was. This was the aircraft warning service tower in the Second World War. It was built by the men in town. It was commissioned by the U.S. Army Air Force. And it was manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in shifts by anybody that took the school to be an observer. Tar paper outside was a place for the bathroom and a wood stove that you had to keep burning. Plexiglass top with a big round mat in the center. And every plane that went over had to be reported, even if it was local. And I was the youngest one in grade 12. So it was fun, and I was very proud. I do have my Iron Man here, if anyone wants to see it. It was very important. There were very few of them in the country, much less the state. And it was out behind Walter's house, and you know, all over. Ramapo Road, the post office, Brooks House, Mary's from the Roberts, and we went out behind the barn. So next one, that's the idea, kind of often, but anyway, more that when you were on duty. And this was 4-H. I don't know whether people know we had a 4-H club during the war year. But we did, and we had a truck from Torrington collected cans and bottles for refunds for our treasure. And we went to Red Polo. There's a big section there right off the road on the right, west. It was so full of milk. We had growing bags, and we helped take the milk we got, and they were shipped to be manufactured for likeness. The cotton was the and we also provided for our treasure packed soybeans. Most people didn't know what soybeans were, but a man named Brendan Beverly had thought that they were good stuff. So the 4-H club had both our bags. Couple times a month we would go and he gave us money. So kind of interesting what some of us kids did, kept us busy. And now more really doesn't need an introduction. It's our parts. And we'll be right on. And the census is, it's hard to see, but the red mill is on the left. Now I'm not going to say who lives in that mountain across the road. I know. We believe that this was when they were building that bridge. But down by the red mill. It was in our abutments, you can see the water coming through. We know it's not the dam. So we're assuming that all the piles of dirt and stuff work and construction. This bridge over here just doesn't look like it's really too late. The one house is still here. So it's one of the things. And we right on to the red mill. Horses brought the grain in to be ground, and the horses carried it away. The milling stone is right in the middle of that big section. And the folks that you see behind that building are the ones that ran the wheel, the falls, it's that small, ugly waterfall in the bridge here. We kids had a great time going over to that island. Fred and Dad had a place they swam on the island. But John and my daughter was my age. We spent a lot of time together on that island, and we go and get some bread and I have no idea who has this now. But the last time the bill was still in, I don't know whether it's been taken up. Anything else in the time that trucks started coming eventually. And the daughter, she went to school and they made a little bakery and she also baked bread with her mom. And these folks down in Dunham, I'm living in Dunham myself. And we told to the general stories. And put a few in. This is the kind of house. It's a super hill road. One of the older houses in town. Charlie Duncan was a real town man who was on the general school committee. Just one of those citizens with had a great family. One of his sons, I don't know if you can, crashed the plane and the house in an airport and his wife were taken off. And one of the older sons, I'm thinking it was before Brooks and we were killed, was in the airport to land to the DC-3. Everybody from everywhere. Then it was the drive-in theater and and this is 17 hours, just a few years before the previous. So I was spending a long time. And they were connected with the town. The conference were kind of, I would call it caretakers. The town was privately owned by a man in Pearl Grove. And another place we spent time. I think we have one view from the tower. That's a little so that's
Quick correction, Priscilla. So that was not the Ashley Falls house. That was still the house.
that was
My arrow. Sorry.
yeah. And interior, pretty much for the house. I haven't to be the next one, but that and I said something, and a couple named Harry Riddle, and he was a friend of my dad's. And actually, there's cemetery lots right now, but it was privately owned then. I don't think they were the ones that Trinity to proceedings or but it's one of this and it's picture and it's a picture.
Oh, that's Ryan.
Taking it over.
Hi, can I call you back? I'm zooming in on the meeting. Okay. Are you home? Okay, bye.
Bushnell, like so many. And his cousin Claire Smith just published this in September 2022. And I thought it was amazing book, so I went to it. This is amazing. And in the front, she says, thank you to Jim Miller, and the Research Center, you know, part of the humanities that falls in. So we do have results and president, provide lots of Smith and students from actually volunteers. So this is a wonderful resource, and there's some great details that Fred showed me in March. So I looked at all of them, but just to start with that, because his family at the beginning of the Smiths, when they first came, was a great grandmother. Just great grandmother.
His mother lived with my great grandmother. My great grandmother was killed in the Civil War. And part of this is based on the letters that he wrote home. This would be hard. Another book for that's all. Writing stuff. And there's including the last story, which should be the ministry his son is one that make it within. He bought it, that actually falls in, he bought it, which is the
Actually, right, right. Now, and that was the great plan up, right?
And his sons, Donald and Fred, and I grandfather, then forward, and Frank Smith thought before his sons survived. Well, still are in existence, in some form. Donald was in New Jersey with the salesman, with a lot of marketing for this building in New York City. And my grandfather operation of the board.
So then your father, your grandfather was from the boy. Then tell us a story about
Well, it got to the point where different material being used in buildings. So there wasn't as much call for the marble. So we decided to switch it over and make agricultural limestone. So that it's kind of a shift in business, because at that point the government was starting to pay farmers to put limestone on the field. That was a good idea until before we filled up the water. You got to been water pumps.
responsible for a while. Myself,
For a while.
tell the story about your grandfather, your father.
There was but the pumps were struck by lightning and exploded. And that's how it ended up going up the water.
That was a hard change.
That would be a good thing.
So didn't you say once to one of the gallons And over time, it was nice something. You should say that the child is about nine. And he was doing, did I make that? That's not pretty good. It's okay. And so we'll make it. We'll try to. So the next part then, because that was part that created hardships, so then your grandfather had to sell the business. Right? Is that what happened?
But eventually, back to the home.
So that changed lives for everybody.
Well,
Why? Can anybody make an adjustment for the grandfather now?
no,
Or your father?
kid, when in that house, there was a lot of family there.
What do you need? Yeah.
Even if we live, by the time, when I have to do it, it was just. Yeah, it's just.
And then dad started doing some work with the company and came in. And it was, oh, got okay.
Right, that's the house across from the basketball school. That was actually a house that was built. Still, can't afford it. Yeah, we couldn't do that today, we throw it away. Just digging around in the yard there, we always hitting.
Could I interject something that is interesting? Out of the quarry every day. Ed Bradley drove a dump truck from the quarry over where the cemetery is. And don't. I don't know, that's not slang, but he called it leftover. Yeah, whatever, anyway, that was his job. I can't begin to tell you how many trips that man made. We were in school and he had the whitest teeth. He would smile and wave and you couldn't see anything but his teeth. He was Smart Bradley's husband. March Bradley drove bus for years. But he drove that truck. I almost think it's the one hanging in. You know, can you imagine from the quarry over by the school and all day long? It's wondering what's nuts.
They do that at the quarry down.
Yeah.
They go.
Back and forth, yeah, back and forth. And they ride along those paths. They speed it now. Right.
I live in now is after they built.
Yeah.
By the Smiths, the lady that was taking care of my great grandmother.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Fred, did you go to school?
And her mother is.
That's what Georgiana's
Georgiana's
mother.
mother.
And they all seem very interesting. Enough to read about. So, did you go to school? Fred?
I went to Asher Falls for 4 years.
The school.
Right.
So the fourth grades.
Yeah, my dad went there when he was 6. And I'm going to school.
Sheffield Center. So just to shift subjects just for a second, you said you mentioned the story about what Priscilla was talking about at the Red Mill and the state. You remember when you were a child, what was your experience
I
there?
remember, well, one thing that my dad always told me, John Donald, he had a lean leg. And he always say, with those toes itched.
You said that spirit of Jesus.
My sister, we made donuts. You know, their shop.
Yeah.
Because your mom was just playing bread.
They were very young.
Okay, well, that was one of the best. Trying to switch over. Fred, do you feel good about what we talked about? You remember? Anything else? If you'll do us the honor on that. You might. Yeah, that would be great. It's not a hot seat. So it's.
The driving force to me for the town's existence was the quarry. So that all the houses that we looked and all the businesses were the workmen, the managers, everything, we exist because of that quarry.
Yeah.
Conceptually.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's amazing. It's true. Hi, Wanda. This is Wanda Steepka, everybody, longtime resident of Ashley Falls, that wanted to this one and grew up in New York City. Yes. And came here later and it's been quite a while. And Wanda's an amazing person and really many things, but I think she's really hard on this and still is. And I moved to Chester for 10 years. So what Wanda and I did was we sat and talked the other day and just sort of reminisced about some things. And one of the things that was a great story, he's willing to condense a little bit. You don't mind that. Was what you were remembering about having Miller's tour of Ashley Falls last year.
Yes, I do, but actually it was 2 years ago. And when we were in front of the house that had been Maplewood Inn, mention was made that one of the guest registers was signed by Mrs. James Roosevelt, Sarah Delano Roosevelt. And I don't know, I don't know whether I missed it the year or whether maybe she didn't mention it. But later on I thought, oh, I wonder if that could have been around the time that Sarah Roosevelt commissioned her portrait from my father. And that was in 1934.
And just for a second, can you tell us about your father a little bit?
Oh, yes, well, he had a studio in New York and she wanted to have her portrait done so that she could give it to her son, her only child, as a Mother's Day present. And but the interesting thing is that that was 1934, and I went to the Dewey Research Center and found out that it was 1921 when she visited Ashley Falls, and in the mid 1940s, my father bought his property here.
Amazing coincidence.
The painting, you wanted me to say that he did her portrait, and she sat in the studio in New York, which wasn't far from the townhouse, and he presented to President Roosevelt the portrait at a tea on the south portico of the White House. And the mother was there, Eleanor was there, and a few other guests. And
1934, right?
yes, 1934 on Mother's Day. And then
Miss Brady was just because she was on Ashley Falls tour.
yes,
And she signature was at Penguins. She was really
yes, and I thought, well, wouldn't be exciting that we're around the time painting. But
it also warrants more research for you because we wanted to figure out when was she here, why was she here? And we just were talking briefly and said, well, this is really Front seven is from New York to Boston, so that's another story.
And maybe on the and the visiting friends, but maybe we should just stopping over. And why is she coming from New York? Because often she coming from Hyde Park. She finds Hyde Park on Hudson as we does.
Just one more moment, there was also something that you said in the past, which was great. You said, about, you remember that you probably never tea.
Yes, and she, in New York, she invited him to tea to her townhouse. And his studio was not far from where she lived. And my mother took a photograph of him in what people actually only see the head, but the hat is of another era.
You also couldn't remember if it was before or after the portrait.
I don't know. I don't know whether it was before or after. I'm sorry, I don't know. And she, her diary is in the archive at the FGR Museum and Archives. It's part of the permanent collection.
But does she?
Well,
That's in your future.
19th century person, so I'm sure there's a line.
See the archivist sticking in there.
I'm almost positive you will mention.
And also, also Wanda remembers Penny Candy Store.
Oh, yes, indeed. I do remember going in there, and I remember the owner, he looked like 99. And the way he did was, he didn't look like a person, let's say, in the 1940s or 50s, from the early era. It's very evocative.
Bert, so one more thing I wanted to just say, and then we need to go forward, because we'll near over here.
My job.
It's a separate topic, but the Colonel Ashley House went through a lot of different phases, was moved and it's there, and eventually finally had the idea of doing tours. And Wanda was the first docent when she was, I think, in your 20s, right? First person to show.
I can't remember if I was in my late college or my early graduate school. But it was around there, of course, it was time the year it opened to the public and were willing.
That must have been wonderful.
I had Saturday, there were other guys, but Saturday was my day, so I walked down Granville Road, opened the museum, and I was the only guide and guard there. And Mr. William C. French, who was the librarian, Bushnell-Sage Library, and the brother of Carlton French, he was the one who opened the building to the public. And later on, of course, the trustees acquired it.
Wonderful, thank you for this.
I'm going to do the same sort of thing, part of the pleasure. Barbara is a long time. And she's been an active member of this church. And this past 2 minutes we were setting up. We're speaking with Mike. I said, you know, we really could have somebody speak about the church. And he said, well, that's Barbara, please still come over and do it. But Barbara prepared a wonderful detailed outline of the church history. But rather than go into detail on that, I'm going to ask you this question. So you had some note in there in 1964.
Actually, call it Methodist churches. Combined, their services. 1975 from Ashley Park and I started down here. Down here. First and second. Jack. there was so forth. But she, and, I don't know, it was 4-H or some other people. They researched the history of the church. And we have quite a bit of that. But otherwise, it's been quite busy at the time at our church for many years. With that many members and so forth. But at this point, we've lost so many of the older members. And what we need to build up and do. Grow from the young people. Have a few. But very small group. Here. So Bruce Betty in the chat, she was a minister for many years. And, she was a member of, you know, every Sunday. She wasn't. I don't know what else she did.
Oh, yeah, Tracy,
She was here. Started having from her chicken body. That's not going to help. Next year will be 60 years.
Thanks very much, Bob.
Hi, I'm was English. We moved here, my father moved us here when I was 6 years old, so that was 60 years ago. And my father was a Canadian man, and my mother was Canadian as well. My father actually never got a citizenship, he got a green card every year. Worked very hard, loved this country, but we neither one of my parents finished high school, so my father didn't feel competent to take the that naturalization test. So he didn't get his citizenship. So he bought a sawmill over on Clayton Road in 1963 from Carlton Knott, and moved his family here. And I have a picture of the original, which is this one. These are aerial photos, and that's pretty much what it looked like when we moved here. And
where's
Okay,
School
so-
Street?
so, okay, so that's an interesting thing, and I don't know if anybody can inform me, but I believe the side of the road. Okay, so when you come off of Route 7, I believe that's Clayton Road until you get to the intersection of East Main Street, at which time it turns into School Street, which is odd to me because the school is.
There's a violation of some college street. Some college street.
Okay, my address reads Clayton Road.
And I feel what's played wrong all the way from.
That's. Okay,
So where's
so,
Clayton Road at?
so this is the house I grew up in, which is at the lumber mill. And if we come this way, the school, the schoolhouse is right over there. So, so Route 7 was built that year. Okay, so my father, kept the house, all of these outbuildings, and all of that we tore down. And we put up his sawmill, there, a small building, which is better known. And this one, you can see it's so much is gone. It's much cleaner. So here's our house, and here's the sawmill over here. And so this over here is 7.
That's seven.
Yeah. Yeah. So my father was a very neat guy. I just want to say, he built a special thing to drag the yard, the lumber mill to pick up all the parts. He didn't like a mess. He liked everything in order. His stacks of lumber, his piles of logs, everything was remarkable. And he did that often to take care of that. He tore down the outbuildings around our house. And actually, what I remember, which you can't do today, is he dug a big trench and bulldozed everything in it. So I think if anybody did some excavating or exploring there, they might find something. The other thing that he would do, so way back then, he would saw up the logs. My father got up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And he got in his truck and he went into the woods and he cut the trees down and he dragged them to the truck and he put them on the truck and he got back home breakfast time, a little bit before mid-morning. And then he would take just a short break and then he would start sawing. And he had my grandfather when we first moved there, my mother's parents were with us. They had the back of the house here had a woodshed. My father had that made into a small apartment for my grandparents. So my grandfather could help him in the mill. My mother was tomboy through and through. She loved to work at the mill too whenever my father would go. And he would let her when my father was engaged. Back then, so my father had been a logger. This was all new to him to have a sawmill. So he was sawing the logs and he had the slab wood that came off of it. And I don't know, some people who've been here a long time might remember this, but so to the north of the sawmill, Mr. Jaffe had a swamp area. It was lower than the rest of the ground. And he allowed my dad to dump his slabs there a couple times a year. My father would burn them. He didn't have a market for it at the time, so he would burn the slab. One of the stories, and I have a recording of my dad. Dad had dementia for 10 years before he died, but I got him to tell me some stories. One story I have recorded, he tells me how the fire just wasn't starting. He just couldn't get it going at a particular time. So he went to the gas can and went and poured some gas on. He said that thing blew him right into the bank. But he, he always credited God for really keeping an eye on him. But he expanded the mill, he grew it, he hired a lot of employees. Some of you might know my dad. He was willing to hire people who have been in jail, who came out, some pretty rough characters that he wanted to give a chance to. Who was a boss, my dad was. They have a newer one. This is from that first picture was about was before 1963. This was 1968, and this one is 1979. So we might pass it around if anybody's interested, but he had expanded a bit and put up more buildings before his time was done with the mill. He was drying some lumber, he was planing some lumber. And by then he had a market for every byproduct that came out. Early on, he sold the saws to the local farmers. He ended up selling slab wood for firewood. And, the campers first started coming to get it. And then he started selling that. So, and then he ended up getting a chipper and debarker, so he could take the bark off and the chips. And he had a market for that too. So he sold everything. And then, when he retired, he sold the business to Bob Behan, and David Ruth was my husband then, and to my brother Gene. And also he had we had before that, we've gone in partnership with that country law homes as well, which was on that same property. And now we know that, that property has been split in half, and we have a company, logging and lumber on half of it, and, we have, it's, Jack here. So just a couple of childhood stories. So when we moved there, the first week that we were in the house, the neighbors, so Carlton had the house we lived in, and then his daughter, no, his son and daughter-in-law lived with their 5 boys next door to us. And one day, this little boy just walks right in the house, just goes right in, goes into the bathroom, and my mother says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I gotta go to the bathroom." My mother says, "But you don't live here." "No, but this is my grandfather's house, and I can use the bathroom here." It took him a little while to get used to that. I used to go over, so I was 6 years old, and here I was, the only girl in my family. I had 3 brothers. I had 5 boys next door. I had nobody really to play with. So there was Grandma's phone. Just wanted to that girl a bit because so my house was here, and then over here diagonally where the Cradles lived. Mr. and Mrs. Cradle, and her mother, I think it was, lived in the back house, and she was Grandma's home. She had many cabinets with salt and pepper shakers, which for a little 6, 7-year-old girl, she was fascinated. And she was just such a good friend for me. And I found a couple of baby birds one time, blue jays, and I didn't know what to do with them. I brought them. So one of them died and the other one lived, and she kept that bluebird in her house, or that blue jay in her house, for I don't know how long. But the interesting thing about that was when you went to see Grandma Scoble and she offered you a place to sit down, she said, "Well, wait a minute, let me just turn that cushion over, because if it had wet stuff on it, I was trying to make sure it was dry stuff inside." And I live in the Cradle's house now, which I just absolutely love. And the other thing I just want to say is such a great town to walk around in. My 2 best friends were Debbie Dillard and Priscilla Malnati, both on farms. And I wanted to be a farmer's wife because I love their mothers. Just love to have their houses. And we used to have overnight sleepovers at Debbie's house. And we would go in the night after dark in our nightgowns, and we would walk on the street. And Mrs. Herbert would put her window up and say, "Who's out there?" And we would run like the Dickens back to go back to Debbie's house. But we had a lot of fun. And Mr. O'Hara, I just want to mention trick-or-treating at Mr. O'Hara's house. We always have donuts and cider and apples, and he invited us in. He was also a teacher of ours. And I did go to school at Ashley Law School for 3 years. And Mrs. Chapin was my first teacher there. And she made such a difference in my life. She really did. So I'm so happy to be able to share just some of my stories.
The contemplate number 3 is Will Conklin. Will Conklin is not here. He came down with COVID. He was scheduled to speak, but what did drop off was the milk can, and that's from his H. Conklin farm. This was the Harry we knew as the lawyer. This was his grandfather. So Will, who we know now, but his grandfather Bill and Vera had originally run the farm that's now the sod out on Hewitt Street, 1500 Hewitt Street. And the family also is related to the Dunham family. So the conference worked at the mill, just the red, when it was an, the picture you had. And,
And before they went on to the fire, they would go for that building. Yeah.
when I knew,
John James.
well, I knew Bill and Vera, they were making donuts for Memorial Day. Every year they would make the donuts. And so I remember going over there once. Vera had gone, she had died by then, but there's Bill. Sitting in the kitchen, dipping in the donuts, you know, he's going at it, because he wouldn't let Memorial Day without our donuts.
Can I tell one quick story? Because I live in the house in some year, I just want to tell this quick story. So Esther Cradle, I asked her years ago. We were invited to go over to her house after the Memorial Day parade and have donuts and coffee. And by the time it was all done and she had aged out of doing it, there were so many people, everybody from the parade went over to the Cradle's house for coffee and donuts. I said, how did this start? How did you have this idea? And she said, well, she said, one day we invited this one couple to come over and have coffee with us. And then the next year, we invited a couple more. And then for some reason, the ones that we had invited other people. And they started bringing some food, and then the other people were inviting other people, and the next thing you know, everybody was coming over. So it wasn't originally for me to have everybody over. And when we moved there, or actually bought the house for my daughter, and somebody says she's gonna have coffee and donuts. Said no.
Neil, that is why we have, Memorial Day. We continue that tradition here for us. Thanks to.
You know, Phil Conlon was agent, he was in the 90s when I last saw him. He had a rocket chair and he had this technique where he would get it going. And then eventually he would. So I'm gonna move on now. Ken Shop has not lived here all his life. When I went after him to try to get him to fill in when I knew Will wasn't coming. He said, well, I don't know any stories. I mean, I just spent visiting my grandparents here. And, you know, then he spoke to me for half an hour, so. He was Ken.
Thanks, Neil. My wife and I, Rebecca, bought the house at the end of Ramapo Road not too long ago, 1982. And we've lived there ever since. That house was built by, we believe, a carpenter. We really don't know who built it, but someone who worked for Gilligan Brothers. That has a Gilligan Brothers design, and they were renowned for their cave style houses at the time. And that's kind of a copy of a Gilligan Brothers house. And it was just the basic salt box structure to put the cushion on. But I've got a few anecdotes and quick stories. I don't have anything to show you. So we moved there in 1982, but growing up, all my family was from Sheffield, Ashley Falls. My grandparents, Art, Lily, and Shop, bought the house on Berkshire School Road on the east side of Schnapp Brook. It was red with a barn on the side. There's quite a few trees there now, but when I was a little guy, you could stand in their side yard and look all the way to the mountains. And there wasn't a single tree between that house and the mountain. It was all acres. In 1962, they bought the Maplewood Inn. I was 5 years old. So most of my memories are not from the Sheffield house, but the Ashley Falls house. And I had a big family. And there were some big family gatherings. Family business stadium system was in Canaan, Connecticut. Every day, my father, I grew up in Faubourg, New York. Every day, my father, not Flabrack, Faubourg. You can always tell when someone's not from Faubourg, you say Flabrack. But every day commuted from Faubourg to Canaan, Connecticut. And many times I'd get dropped off at my grandmother's house. I had 4 siblings, and I was the oldest, and there was a lot to do over here. All my older cousins, who in my world were the coolest people in the world, to hang out with. You know, we go fishing, we walk down behind Dwight Diller's red barn, there was a dirt road and a bridge that cut over to what I call the airport or dump road. There was a wooden bridge there, and we used to sit on that bridge for hours and fish. Or we continued down Ramapo Road, and there was an old steel spring bridge with wooden planks over the Housatonic River and fish off that bridge. Rickety bridge. Or we cross the street, and right here, everyone's referring to the candy shop. When I was a little guy, that was George Welch's garage. And he did have a selection of candy. And we beat it over there. And, you know, for a penny or a nickel, you could buy something. And there used to be a gigantic clock that hung in the peak of that garage with hands. And I don't know if any of you were acquainted with Yo Lee and Mildred Chan that lived on Ramapo Road. When I went into their first time, I went in their house, they had that clock hanging in their house. And I believe George Welch's wife, Christine, was the postmaster here in town for years. And I got a few more notes. I won't take too long. I have to get my glasses. But I have glasses. Oh, here they are. Yeah, so my grandmother actually was born in this town, not in Great Barrington, but born on the corner of Silver Street and Bull Run Road on the Muir Farm. John Muir, her grandfather, owned a huge gentleman's farm on the corner of Bull Run Road and Silver Street. There was a very large farmhouse on that corner that the present owners moved several hundred yards up the hill off of Bull Run Road. You can still see it in the winter. And she was born in that house, and that was her grandfather. So she became acquainted with this area at a young age, but she grew up in New Rochelle, New York. In 1942, my grandparents moved to Sheffield, but in 62 bought the inn. And the inn was a treasure trove. It was like a time capsule. They did some modifications. They found a silver mug in the wall that my grandmother liked a lot. And one antique dealer took a lot of interest in it, kept coming back, offering them more and more. And finally, she went down and saw Harry and Dino Weiss, who owned the antique shop here by the bridge. And he goes, yeah, that was made by Paul Revere. And they ended up selling it. I remember it was a big deal for $8,000. This was in the mid-60s. You know, they bought the house for $12,000. The inn itself was really neat, and it had a tavern downstairs, and it was open to the public. And there was a gigantic pool table. And I remember when the estate was settled after my grandfather died, that pool table was still in the basement, and everybody looked at each other and said, we're never going to get this thing out of it. I think Mr. James had to maybe dealt with that pool table at some point. But it still had the racks for the kegs of beer. We pulled out of that house hundreds of wooden cases marked Maplewood Inn that were divided with wood slats to hold bottles of beer or soda. You know, we smashed them up for kindling.
There's one right over on the table.
Is there? Yeah, I think I have one left too. And we have some pennants that say, you know, they were popular, little felt pennants, Maplewood Inn, and beer bottles with Maplewood Inn embossed on them. But you know, as I said, we live on Ramapo Road, but it didn't always go by the name of Ramapo Road. It went through several names. Andrus Road, I think, was the earliest name for that road. That was the main road before 7A or Route 7. And there was a schoolhouse across the street from John Howden's farm. A little further down where the brick house is now on the left, there's a tavern back there. I remember a guy went back there years ago, metal detected, and found pewter buttons and a remnant of a pewter plate and some other cool things. But it was also called O'Neill's Landing, and there was a horrific car crash. It wasn't a car crash, it was a horrific crash at the intersection where the train tracks crossed Ramapo. And there was a camp over by Twin Lakes, and young people from New York City would ride the train up. When I say young, you know, 8, 10, so, you know, and they arrive on Saturday, get dropped off in the center of Sheffield, And a truck from the camp would come, big state truck, wooden flatbed, chicken wire sides with benches on each side, and they go down 7A and on to Ranapo to go to the camp, and the driver claimed in the court testimony he never saw the train coming, and the train hit this truck and killed most of the children. And I remember Kenny Coons, who was an old-time Astor Falls resident, telling me, Robin would probably might know this, that one of Jimmy's great uncles, who had never left Astor Falls his entire life, was sent to New York City to testify on behalf of the plaintiffs. And but that's when the road was called O'Neill's Landing. Ashley Falls, around the turn of the last century, 1900, was mostly underwater. In Connecticut, they built a hydroelectric dam about a half-mile south of the border, just below John Budis's farm. And it flooded all of Lower Ashley Falls, but this was in Connecticut. And this was the new thing, electricity, you know, and the Lurch farm was entirely underwater. The waterfront came up all the way to Lougheed Chan's house, which Brian and Susan now own. And there's a provision to this day to allow flooding several times a year on Ranapo Road, so that the hydroelectric dam could test something in their spillways, block them up, and so also in that Maplewood Inn, it harbored a number of businesses. Lou Galata or Lenny Galata had a barber shop in there for about 3 or 4 years. What's that?
What's in the barn?
Yeah, it was in the barn.
Yeah.
And as you face that barn, my grandmother had an antique shop there for years, but on the left, in the 1850s, that was a general store. And I know this because I had to clean out the attic. And I found the general ledger for the store. Grandfather snatched it and donated it to the Sheffield Historical Society. My aunts were Joan Brooks, Lois Emberlin. Joan lived next to the post office. Lois lived above the fabric shop for a while before she and her husband purchased the old railroad station in the center of Sheffield in 1974 and moved it to its present location and turned it into a lovely home. They demolished the old hotel next to it. Some of these little buildings you might drive by going up Route 7A, you kind of scratch your head. What was that? Right here in the center of town, the little yellow building next to the fabric shop, that was the old tinsmith shop. And you'll see a piece of his handiwork still on the chimney, that beautiful tin cap, at least last time I looked, it was there. And you go further north on 7A, as you're leaving town, there was a really neat little area. This was a busy town during Fair Week. Great Barrington backed up all the way to Ashley Falls here. Barrington Fair Horse Race was in town, but there was like a campground with a swimming pool, but there's a little tiny dilapidated building on the left that you don't take much notice of. That was a little dinette. You go in there and get lunch or breakfast. This is right over the bridge. Yeah, right on the bridge on the left as you're headed north. Yeah, it's on the verge of collapsing.
Across from the old motel.
Yes, across from the old motel. You know, they mentioned a trolley earlier. The trolley ran into Ashley Falls. If you go north on 7A, as soon as you cross the Housatonic River, used to be able to pull over. Now it's difficult because of the berm they created. But on the other side of the railroad tracks, the old trolley track.
By the pottery, there's still the bridge.
There's a bridge there, that's right. And there used to be a big vet somewhere way behind there where they actually created an earthen bridge.
Up further by where, near where the body shop is now.
Yeah.
Where the lumber yard was, that
Yeah.
used to be the trolley garage.
Yeah. But, I don't want to get sidetracked on, things that don't pertain to Ashley Falls. Yeah, John Howden, you know, that's one of the colorful characters. You know, when I moved here in 82, John was kind of old, and one of the first times I met him, he was working hard, and I wanted to introduce myself. He owned a lot of land I enjoy hunting. I remember sweat was pouring down his face, and took out this bandana handkerchief. And I realized he wiped his face with this thing, and his head disappeared. He had the largest hands in the world. It startled me almost, at how big his hands were. And he is very kind of a soft-spoken, direct person. And now and then he'd come up and ask me to help him picking pumpkins or, you know, something around on the farm. I used to mow his lawn, but two quick stories about John Howden. He came up once and said, "Hey, Kenny, I need your help. 3 trucks from Long Island just arrived and we got to load them with pumpkins." I'm like, "Sure, what do we do?" He says, "Well, you're going to pick the pumpkins and bring them out to the 2-tire track in the field, and then they're going to get them in these big cardboard boxes and get them on the truck." So I meet him down the field and he hands me a pair of like clippers you prune roses with, perhaps. I don't know if anybody saw those stems on those pumpkins. So he hands them to me. He says, "Here, just walk and clip the pumpkin here, and then pick it up and bring it out to the dirt road." And I said, "Yeah, sure, Mr. Howden." Yeah, he disappeared. He's now dealing with these fellas that are buying the pumpkins, and I grab this. I go down. I can't squeeze this thing. I'm kind of looking around, maybe I got the wrong pumpkin, but I try another one, and I can't cut this pumpkin. So I go to another one. Now I'm using 2 hands, and I'm punching mainly through this thing. I'm like, "Oh my God." So I bring it out, I go back, I'm looking for small stems, but the idea is to get the big ones cut, not the little ones. So he takes note of this and walks over and kind of disgustingly said, "Just get the pumpkins out to the road." I watched him. He grabbed these clippers. It was as if he was pruning a rose bush. Chunk, chunk, chunk. I couldn't keep up. He was flipping so fast. So that's, I always thought that was pretty amusing. The second one, he knocks on the door and says to me, "Kenny, I need your help." "What's up, John?" He goes, "I need help pulling a calf." I didn't grow up on a farm. I'm like, "Yeah, sure. This sounds interesting." I had no clue what it involves. So I go down there and they've got this cow in this very narrow stable. She's got a harness and her rear end's exposed. And he walks up, we've got a calf sideways. I'm like, "Oh, you know, this should be interesting." All of a sudden, he's armpit deep in this cow. And looking at him, and yeah, I've never seen anything like this. And he's like, "I got the loop around the leg." So he gets the loop around the leg and he pulls the rope out. It's tied to a scout stick. Penny Coon shows up to help, and we're both having a stick in our hand. He's got 2 hands on one end, I got 2 hands on the other, and John's yelling at us to pull. And we start to pull, the ground's slippery, and both our feet at the same time from under us, and he yells at us to get our feet up on the cow's rear end. Her hooves are behind the cords, and we do. We're pulling, and all of a sudden this calf comes flying out on top of us with the afterbird. So that was pulling a calf, and I couldn't wait to tell my entire family I was pulling around Thanksgiving table. One more quick story. Comes up to me, I say, "I need your help pulling a calf." I'm like, "No problem. I know what this is all about. I'm gonna pull this calf out." So I go down and meet him, and he looks at me. He goes, "Your arms are long. Reach in there around this calf." I'm like, "Me?" And he goes, "Yeah, take your shirt off if you want." I got my arm up to my armpit inside of this cow, and I'm feeling around. I feel a hoof, and I'm really excited. I'm yelling. I can feel. He goes, "Yeah, we'll get the loop around it." And as I'm getting the loop around it, this cow has a contraction. And at first I was like, "Hey, Mr. Howden, the cow is squeezing me." "That's all right, you're fine." And it got tighter and tighter. And I got kind of nervous to the point where I thought this cow was going to squeeze my arm off. You know, I was really got quite anxious about it. And he's like, "Relax, just get the other loop on." I got the other loop on, and we managed to pull this calf out. So I went home, and I don't know if it was Thanksgiving dinner or Easter. Anxious to tell that story. He's such a good neighbor, such a true, hardworking, classic New England farmer. The last time I saw John really didn't care about driveways and lawns. If I was out in the lawn, he just would drive up to me and be in my lawn. Wouldn't pull into the driveway. The last time I saw him, he pulled up, crossed the lawn, stopped. He said, "Hey, have you seen any Herefords? Got a couple out of pasture." I said, "No." He raised those big brown and white Herefords. They're all old, no barns. And he didn't raise the adults for beef. All the calves were like, my wife would always get upset in the spring after they took all the calves. In 2 weeks, this entire herd bayed and bellowed for their young ones that were carted off to the meal factory. But I said, "No, John, I haven't." So he drove down 7A and pulled over and got up on the tracks. It was around 9:30 at night. Kenny Coombs. I said, "Hey, I've been down to John's house. I haven't seen him." So last time I saw him, he was in my front yard. So Kenny drove down 7A and found him dead in the middle of the tracks. And the entire herd had surrounded him. And he's just a great, Ashley Falls, great individuals. It's a great town. I love this town so much. So many good people. I've got such good neighbors, Robin and Jim Bennett, kindest people. Everybody always waves, says hello. Just feel very fortunate. Now, I have one more thing. My kids went to the one-room schoolhouse in Ashley Falls. My son was there for how long, Becky?
Pre-K program, wasn't too long.
Yeah, such a neat thing. He's 35. Lost it. But thanks. Appreciate it.
On that note, I would ask Kathy and Keith to do a little brief, very brief chat about the last use of the Ashley Falls School. Is that the way to say it? Yeah. As a brief note, at the entrance where you signed in, there's a picture from the Berkshire Courier, July 13th, 1985, I think. And you'll notice Simi Swain, Samantha Swain, and my son Dan are helping Martha Shaw in donations. And that was at the time, that was the community center or something like that. So it's on the back. So please just take a quick look. So there was a teacher named Eileen Brennan, and she ran a 3-4 program at the school, and it was very unique. And as Jim Sharp, they started to make a big difference in your life.
I will be so good. Then started the late history, which is late 1980. So yeah, we were just going to talk a little bit about sort of the late version of the Ashley Falls Schoolhouse. So it was a one-room schoolhouse from Chardonnay, started it one of the new veterans. And it started in 1977. The program is really different. It's not the sort of program that keep going today. It was very child-centered and right in fourth grade. The last year that we were in the I'm going to say more about that. Last year that we were in the one schoolhouse was 1980 and 1981. That was fourth grade. And then it had got used at under 9. And
Well, actually, before that, it moved to where Marketplace Cafe is now. My brother was actually there, and he's got a program as well, still again, 3rd and 4th grade. And as Kate was saying, incredibly student-centric, where the students would help, we would help craft the menus, we would make the lunches. And when the lessons were taught, if somebody wasn't getting something, Eileen would just look to us and say, "Can anybody explain this?" And I remember one time there was a math lesson that was going on, and there were some kids who weren't getting it. And Al Reynolds, got up, after Eileen, he said, "Can anybody else help explain this?" He got up and because he knew each of the students, all of the friends, how they thought, he explained it in a way that, that they got. And that was the beauty of this program.
is that everybody in the class had different strengths. And everybody helped each other. And I remember when we went to the fifth grade, there were 5 or 6 of us who went into Leo Alvarez class. And the first half of the year, we just sat and did, other things and helped other students because we were so far ahead because the way that she ran that program and it was designed made sure that everybody was really able to excel. And the kids who got certain things helped the others who didn't. And some of the kids who got the math didn't get the English, and and it was vice versa. And so nobody felt like they were left. We were all just part of one really, collaborative community.
Talk about the omelet.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Exactly. I was going to skip all the other things. We all had jobs that rotated, like we had the dog walker and cook, the dishwasher, and my favorite job was ombudsman, which was, and it rotated every week, and so if there was some sort of conflict between kids, you didn't go to Eileen, you went to the ombudsman. And so, you can see these, because I went back and volunteered for years after I left that. You can see these little kids, and one was listening, what happened when you're going to do, what happened when you're going to do. Well, I think it's so cute, and we learned to, we learned to resolve conflicts on ourselves. Obviously, we couldn't be good at it. This was really empowering and Jane Burke has all the archives, and I can't help her with the project, but not sure what it would be, but something sort of honoring all the work that I needed. We got a science school, drawing of the building, schoolhouse, and then an album of like clippings and photos. Thank you. Thank you so much. So yeah, we just went into that. And
I just want to add, I mentioned a couple of little buildings. There's another really neat building. And it's behind the old Maplewood Inn. If you go up East Main Street now, and you look along the tracks, you'll see a yellow 3-story like barn with doors that go all the way to the top. That was the ice house for the inn. And the walls, as I recollect, were maybe 8 to 12 inches thick and filled with sawdust, and they keep that filled with ice for drinks for their customers, so on and so forth. I always thought that was kind of neat. It's probably the only ice house in southern Berkshire County now. Yeah, they're all over there. Yeah, they're all over there.
This whole thing is starting by library trustee. She's going to announce some of the other programs. And we'll go with some changes. Somebody wanted to know, but I'm just
brochure here, please take a copy. There are many, many more programs. The library's records here, as well. And if you have any questions about this program, other programs, speak with the first one.
Everyone, thank you for coming out. Yes, thanks for coming out. The Crossroads exhibit, if you don't know, it's called Crossroads Change in Rural America. It's a Smithsonian exhibit that is traveling across the country. It came to Massachusetts in the fall of 2022. There was a call put out by Mass Humanities for hosts to apply. We were happy to be chosen as one of 6 host sites in the state. We are the 5th tour location. We're the furthest west. We're the only one in the Berkshires. We opened up last Sunday. We unveiled the exhibit. The exhibit is on view at the library for May 6th. So I encourage you to come out, take a look. It's really interactive. There's videos. There's like towns that you can set up. There's maps. There's lots of really cool portions. I really hope that you kind of see yourself reflected in the story of how rural areas have responded to challenges. Our first official program was this past Friday. We had Nancy Smith
We heard growls, hoots, and sounds of silence looking at the wild animals in Sheffield. I'm so excited to see everyone turn out for this event. In part, I was curious to say, I just moved here a couple of years ago. I wanted to know more about Ashley Falls, and so I learned a lot tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. So yes, we've got brochures and postcards with all of our other events. On the weekends at Old Stone Store in the Dan Raymond House, there are exhibits, Voices from the Field, the Men of the 54th, healthcare in the Berkshires. So lots of great events happening all across town, the Jimmy Hall, at the library, at the Old Parish Church. So I really invite you to come out, spend some time there, and thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you to everyone who shares stories. Thank you for our technical support. Yes, and so there are refreshments, so please enjoy. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I know we're running late, but I'd like to have some people. Make comments or questions.
By all the people that I got to.
Yeah. I've been working this in Dosha.
Anybody?
Is there a program of the library about?
So, we were talking about Voices for the Fields, those are the family farms of Sheffield and Ashley Falls. So in 2010, the Historical Society and the Sheffield Land Trust started doing oral histories. And we got through a lot of people. Bill Gilbert came back and did a fantastic, like hours and hours of information. So we do need to get those transcribed. We also want to be able to continue to do more of that, some of the oral histories. And if there's anybody who would be interested in working on that, we're doing additional research because, we can then, tie into other things. Barbara, you probably have a ton, of knowledge in your head, stuff from living all of this. So I think it would be great if there are people who are interested in working on that, to be able to kind of keep going and dig deeper and make sure that it all gets transcribed and into a written format, as well as those oral histories. So yeah,
That
great
would be
question.
terrific.
I want to say something about the senior side of life. When we moved into the house, they have been many on the basement, and there was the wooden stairs going down to the basement were all warm. And they were down to probably a quarter of an inch of the roof. So there was a lot of traffic in and out of that basement. We're all very tall.
I was just, I looked at the chest with Wanda, and I remember I was doing some kind of research or something, and I went over the grade grounds. Quarry property, for years, and it gave me a little extra, a little history of it, and I thought that there was some marble from the quarry that went down, and state contributed marble, and this marble went into the Wakewood area for the one, or to one, I can't remember. But I think it's true.
Yeah, interesting information at the Historical Society about the quarry grading ground, cleaned out the office, that white building, and gave my sister and I all these papers. She said, "Here, yours to classify whatever." So we sorted all through them, there are all kinds of letters, there are orders from all over the place for Ashley Wells. And some long distances away and references to Marble in the nation's capital. They're very interesting papers about of local stuff, and they smell because there was a fire and some of them are scorched, and then still after all the years smell smoky valley. I still smell the smoke, so when we would get them, but they're on the Sheffield Historical Society. Anyone wants to get a little more personal side correspondence and that kind of stuff. And really,
I just, my husband and I came to Methodist in 1973, so we've been here 50 years, hardly neighbors, but I remember going up where the railroad station was. That's where the White House now. You like cabins out there.
yeah.
And it was like the movies. They must have, women cabins. Yeah. I think they were not as beautiful cabins.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
And there were also cabins down at Bushes, right over the line. I believe the son has a longer distance down, but there were cabins there up in the back. I think there were 6 people that knew my husband, his family from Long Island, came up and bought that building was a restaurant, there now, and was turned into a home. And then these people from New York put up the Frankfurt hot dog and hamburgers here out in the ground. It was there for maybe 3 or 4 days. So that's very important.
I just have one comment about the circles. You said those little marble circles were coarse. What I was told, I don't know where I got this, but I was told that in New York City, you were required to have a solid piece of stone under the toilet. And those 4-inch circles are what's left over and was left here.
There's 4 samples. Ask my geologist son. He has a doctorate in geology. There are quartz in.
I like my story better. I'm gonna.
Just another quick one. That was just a sampling. I do have a PowerPoint presentation of about 45, 46 pictures of Ashley Falls area. So anybody that wants it, I did have a sign-in sheet. If you want me to send you the 2 PowerPoints, just make a check mark or indication on the sign-in sheet if you would. And I'll be more than happy to forward it to you.
Just scrape the bottom.
Yeah, we just scraped the bottom of the barrel.
We also went to go around to Ashley Falls School. We also went to kindergarten there, and it was Mrs. Protini and don't remember who else. I don't know how long that.
Letterman.
It's Letterman, yes. So I don't know how long that happened there. Does anybody here know how long that happened before Jim and started the Ashley Falls program?
First grade year, I think, and I think that I went to kindergarten. Okay. Kindergarten, 67.
Okay.
So, and that kindergarten figured out soon after that.
Okay, so I was born in 71, so That's really about 5 years later, so, okay, thank you.
I have to remember everything about my kids' age. I don't have the date and when I was so big.
I'll throw a quick one out. I'm bored. That's what I think. So I think my family and I moved down to Essex Falls because just hanging out here for 2 years in the mid-60s, in 66 and 67. Because before John Downey named Moles Inn, the Talmadge was on it for 2 years. Jean Talmadge was from Kentucky originally. She had the whole basement downstairs. She would put on Motown music and 7 Ward kids and 5 Talmadge kids would dance down there. Jean with babysitters, you know. But when she wasn't around, her fun came from running across all over the Cabo. I mean, we trampled more water flowers for Mr. Bain than anyone. Or we'd outrun John Howard's bulls in the field. And we all take off in a group, and sometimes you'd make it, and sometimes you have to turn around and run back quick, and that kind of thing. That and just all the nature, you know, no accident, Hal Borland used this area for inspiration in his New York Times editorials.
And I think one of the best things about Ashley Hall, they trusted us when we were kids. We spent weekends at the Cabo. There were cottages there. We had checker games and all kinds of games. We take our food in the morning and go and stay there all day Saturday. Mr. Crow would come along, how you doing, kids? What you got today? You playing cards? And nobody really worried. We rode our bikes and they knew when we weren't supposed to. We'd ride our bikes, so we rode Canaan to the movies. We walked to Canaan to the movies. I couldn't think of a better place to grow up or raise my kids.
One day I went down the dump road, across the border of Connecticut, but
Yeah.
watching the aircraft, and all of a sudden the aircraft comes in, lands, goes down, turns around, comes back. Pilot gets out, opens the aircraft in the middle of the field, walks up to us and says, "You want to go for a ride?" It was Bruce McGinnis. He takes the kids on with for right around the area, you know. And, so anyway, always an adventure down here, fun to be here. Thank you.
I want to.
I just want to make one quick addition to the program. With the Sheffield to a generational lens, due to a printing error, didn't make this card. But we want to invite you to join us at Old Parish Church on April 27th at 7 p.m. And it really will be through a generational lens. You've got quite a cast of characters from 20s to 80s, maybe 90s. But anyway, representing all the generations to talk about Sheffield changes, what we've seen, and what our hopes are. So please join us there. There'll be a continuation of lots of great stories.
Well, I get the last word. I
What's
want to
that?
thank everyone who participated with their.
Good. How are you doing?